The alien prince mocked him, so he walked away in silence. The crystal towers of Nexus Prime stretched high into the purple sky, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 distant suns. Commander Jake Sullivan stood at the viewing platform of the diplomatic complex, watching ships from 100 different worlds land on the massive starport below. Each vessel was unique, representing the countless species that made up the Galactic Trade Consortium. Sullivan adjusted his simple blue uniform, so plain compared to the elaborate clothing worn by other delegates. At 42 years old, he had spent most of his life in space, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Today, humanity would make its formal request to join the most powerful economic alliance in the galaxy. Nervous, asked Ambassador Chen, stepping up beside him. The older woman had more diplomatic experience than anyone else in the human delegation, but even she seemed tense. A little, Sullivan admitted. 3 years of preparation, and it all comes down to the next few days. Dr. Rodriguez joined them, carrying a data pad filled with trade proposals and technological exchanges. The Caltharian delegation seemed interested in our medical research, she said. And the Zephyrians want to discuss our agricultural techniques. Sullivan nodded. Humanity might be young compared to other galactic civilizations, but they had something valuable to offer. Human medicine had solved problems that had puzzled alien doctors for centuries. Human farmers could grow food in conditions that other species considered impossible. Remember, Chen said quietly, we're here to observe as much as to negotiate. Every species here has been part of galactic politics for thousands of years. We need to learn their ways. The 3 humans walked through the corridors toward the main assembly hall. Other delegates passed them, some tall and thin like walking trees, others short and round with multiple arms. A few species wore environmental suits, their biology too different to survive in standard atmosphere. Sullivan noticed how the aliens looked at them. Some seemed curious about the newcomers, others appeared dismissive, as if humans were children playing at adult games. A few showed expressions that Sullivan could not read at all. The assembly hall was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers around a central speaking area. Holographic displays showed real-time translations in hundreds of languages. The air hummed with quiet conversations in alien tongues. Sullivan found the human seats in a section reserved for potential new members. Around them sat representatives from other species seeking consortium membership. Most had been waiting for decades. Some had been trying for centuries. Welcome, beings of all worlds, announced the consortium chancellor, a tall blue creature with 4 eyes. Today we gather to discuss trade, cooperation, and the expansion of our great alliance. The opening ceremonies began with speeches from senior members. Each delegate spoke about their species' contributions to galactic civilization. The Vorthic mentioned their energy technologies. The Quilani discussed their space construction expertise. The Velcarians talked about their military protection services. Prince Zethkar of the Velcarian Empire commanded attention when he rose to speak. Nearly 8 feet tall, with dark purple skin and sharp ridges running along his skull, he represented one of the consortium's most powerful military forces. His red eyes scanned the assembly as he spoke. For 10,000 years, the Velcarian Empire has protected trade routes and maintained order, the prince declared. We have fought pirates, rebels, and chaos itself to keep the galaxy safe for commerce. Applause echoed through the hall. The Velcarians were respected, even if they were not always liked. Their military strength had ended many conflicts before they could spread. Prince Zethkar continued his speech, describing recent victories against criminal organizations. Then his gaze fell on the human section. Of course, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. Not all species understand the realities of galactic life. Some remain naive about the challenges we face. Sullivan felt the attention of the hall shift toward the human delegates. He kept his expression neutral, though he sensed where this was heading. Take our newest applicants, Prince Zethkar continued, gesturing toward Sullivan and his companions. The humans claim they want to join our consortium, yet they have no real military power. Their ships are slow and weak. Their weapons are primitive. They have existed in space for less than a century. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Some delegates looked uncomfortable with the prince's direct attack. Others seemed to agree with his assessment. Their average lifespan is barely 100 years. The prince went on. How can such short-lived creatures understand long-term planning? How can they contribute to an alliance that has existed for millennia? Sullivan's hands remained folded in his lap. Beside him, he could feel Chen and Rodriguez tensing. This was exactly the kind of confrontation they had hoped to avoid on the first day. Prince Zethkar stepped down from his speaking platform and walked directly toward the human section. Other delegates turned to watch. The hall grew quiet except for the soft hum of translation devices. In Velcarian tradition, the prince announced, when one's honor is questioned, it must be defended. I formally challenge the human delegation to a duel of truth. Let them prove their worthiness in combat, as civilized beings have done for eons. The silence that followed was complete. Sullivan could hear his own heartbeat. A formal challenge during consortium proceedings was rare, but not forbidden. Refusing would be seen as cowardice by many species. Accepting would likely end in human defeat, since Velcarians were naturally stronger and faster than humans. Every eye in the hall focused on Sullivan as the senior military representative. The challenge was directed at him personally. Prince Zethkar stood just 10 feet away, his red eyes fixed on Sullivan's face. Sullivan slowly stood up. The hall remained silent, waiting for his response. He could accept the challenge and fight, probably losing and humiliating humanity. He could refuse directly and confirm the prince's accusations of cowardice, or he could try to find a diplomatic solution that might satisfy honor while avoiding combat. Instead, Sullivan did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He looked directly at Prince Zethkar, nodded once with respect, and said in a clear voice, "Your Highness speaks his truth." Then he turned and walked toward the exit. No angry words, no arguments, no attempts at explanation, just silence and movement. The hall erupted in confused whispers. Prince Zethkar's mouth opened in surprise. Even the Chancellor looked uncertain about what had just happened. Sullivan reached the door and paused for just a moment. Without turning around, he said, "The human delegation will be available for any who wish to speak with us." Then he was gone, leaving behind a room full of aliens, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. End of part 1. 24 hours had passed since Sullivan's silent exit from the assembly hall. The human delegation's quarters on Nexus Prime felt smaller now, filled with tension and worried voices. Ambassador Chen paced across the main room, her usually calm demeanor cracking under pressure. "Jake, we need to talk about damage control. The news feeds are calling it the greatest diplomatic embarrassment in human history." Dr. Rodriguez sat at the communications terminal, scrolling through reports from across the galaxy. "It's worse than that," she said quietly. 3 major trade agreements have been withdrawn. The Altarian Commerce Guild sent a formal message saying they cannot risk association with unreliable partners. Sullivan stood by the window, watching alien ships come and go from the starport below. His expression remained unchanged, though. Chen could see the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "The Zephyrian Agricultural Council pulled out this morning," Rodriguez continued. "They were our best hope for food distribution technology. And the Christek Consortium canceled their meeting about mineral extraction rights." "I can fix this," Chen said, stopping her pacing. "Let me arrange a press conference. We'll explain that you were simply choosing diplomacy over violence. Many species will understand that approach." Sullivan turned from the window. "No press conferences. Jake, be reasonable. The galactic news networks are running the story every hour. They're calling humans weak, cowardly, afraid to fight. Some commentators are saying we don't belong in space at all. What they're saying doesn't matter right now." Rodriguez looked up from her terminal. "It matters to the consortium members who are voting on our application. And it definitely matters to the humans back on Earth who are counting on us." Chen sat down heavily in her chair. "Help me understand, Jake. What was your thinking yesterday? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you handed Prince Zethkar everything he wanted." Before Sullivan could answer, the door chimed. Intelligence Officer Sarah Kim entered, carrying a secure data pad and wearing the expression of someone who had not slept. Commander, Kim said, "We need to talk privately." Chen stood up. "Whatever it is, we should all hear it. We're all in this together." Kim glanced at Sullivan, who nodded. "Go ahead, Sarah." "I've been monitoring Velcarian communications since yesterday," Kim began. "Their military channels are very active. Too active for a species that's supposed to be providing peaceful security services." She activated her data pad, projecting a holographic star map in the center of the room. Red dots marked Velcarian ship positions throughout the galaxy. "This is their fleet distribution as of 6 months ago," Kim said. The red dots were scattered evenly across trade routes. "And this is today." The hologram shifted. Now the red dots were clustered in specific areas, with a heavy concentration near the outer edge of human space. "They're repositioning," Rodriguez whispered. "More than that," Kim continued. "I've detected at least 3 battle groups that have moved within striking distance of our colonies. These aren't patrol ships or escorts. These are full military vessels with enough firepower to level planets." Chen studied the display. "Could be coincidence. Maybe they're responding to pirate activity or border disputes. That's what I thought initially," Kim said. "But I also intercepted some unofficial communications between Velcarian officers. They're not talking about pirates." She touched her data pad again. An audio file began playing, with automatic translation converting the alien voices to English. "The prince's plan is working perfectly. The humans showed their true nature in front of everyone. Weak, pathetic, no one will object when we remove the threat they represent." Another voice responded. "How soon before we can begin the cleansing operation?" "Soon. Prince Zethkar wants to make sure the galactic community fully understands that humans cannot be trusted. Then we can act to protect civilization itself." The recording ended. The room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. "There's more," Kim said. "I've identified supply ships moving toward the same areas. Medical supplies, occupation equipment, even terraforming gear. They're not planning a quick strike. They're planning to stay." Chen's face had gone pale. "They're going to invade human space." "It looks that way," Kim confirmed. "And based on their timeline, it could happen within days." Rodriguez stood up abruptly. "We have to warn Earth. Get our fleet moving. Prepare defenses." "Our fleet is scattered across a dozen systems," Chen pointed out. "And even if we could gather them quickly, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. All eyes turned to Sullivan, who had remained quiet during Kim's briefing. He walked to the holographic display and studied the ship positions. "Jake," Chen said carefully, "please tell me you have a plan. Please tell me yesterday wasn't really a mistake." Sullivan touched one of the red dots on the display, expanding it to show details about the Velcarian battle group. "Sarah, how long have you been monitoring their communications?" "Since we arrived on Nexus Prime. Standard intelligence gathering for diplomatic missions." "And when did you first detect the unusual ship movements?" Kim checked her data pad. "The major repositioning started about 3 weeks ago, but there were smaller movements beginning almost 2 months back." "Before the summit was announced?" "Yes, sir. Definitely before." Sullivan nodded slowly. "So this wasn't a response to yesterday's events? They were already planning this." Chen realized what he was suggesting. The challenge, the public humiliation. It was all theater. Prince Zethkar needed a reason to attack humanity that the galactic community would accept. Sullivan said, "He needed us to look weak, dangerous, or both. But we do look weak now." Rodriguez protested. "You gave him exactly what he wanted." "Did I?" Sullivan asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, an emergency alert began flashing on Kim's data pad. She quickly activated it, and a new star map appeared showing the edge of human territory. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Long-range sensors have detected Velcarian ships crossing into human space. 3 battle groups, moving toward our outer colonies." "How long until they reach inhabited systems?" Chen asked. "At their current speed, 18 hours to reach Kepler Station." The room erupted in urgent discussion. Chen was calling for immediate evacuation of the colonies. Rodriguez wanted to send warning messages to Earth. Kim was trying to track additional enemy movements. Through it all, Sullivan remained calm, studying the tactical display. With the patience of a man who had expected exactly this development, Jake, Chen said, grabbing his arm, "We have to do something. Our people are going to die." Sullivan looked at her with eyes that held no panic, no fear, only a quiet confidence that seemed impossible under the circumstances. "Yes," he said simply. "We do have to do something, but not what anyone expects." He walked to the communications terminal and began typing a message with careful, deliberate keystrokes. "What are you doing?" Rodriguez asked. "Sending a message to Prince Zethkar," Sullivan replied. "It's time for the second part of our conversation." The emergency session bell rang through the corridors of Nexus Prime, calling all delegates to an immediate assembly. Sullivan walked calmly toward the main hall while other beings rushed past him, their faces showing confusion and concern. Ambassador Chen caught up to him at the entrance. "Jake, whatever you're planning, now might be the time to share it with the rest of us." "Trust me a little longer," Sullivan replied, adjusting the small device clip to his uniform collar. To most observers, it looked like a simple translation. Inside the assembly hall, the atmosphere felt electric with tension. Delegates whispered urgently in their native languages, while holographic news feeds displayed breaking stories from across the galaxy. The main headlines were impossible to ignore. Human colonies under attack. Velcarian forces respond to threat, galactic security at risk. Prince Zethkar stood at the central podium, his massive form commanding attention. Unlike 2 days ago, he no longer seemed interested in theatrical mockery. His expression was serious, almost grave. "Fellow beings of the consortium," the prince began, "I have called this emergency session because our very civilization faces a threat we can no longer ignore." Sullivan took his seat in the human section. Round him, delegates from hundreds of species focused on the prince's words. The translation systems hummed softly, converting his speech into every known language. 48 hours ago, I challenged the human delegation to defend their honor in traditional combat. Instead of accepting like civilized beings, they fled in shame. At the time, I thought this simply showed their cowardice. Prince Zethkar activated a holographic display showing star charts and tactical readouts, but our intelligence services have now discovered the true reason for their retreat. The humans were not being humble. They were buying time to complete preparations for a sneak attack on consortium members. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Sullivan remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. "These images were taken by our patrol ships near human territory," the prince continued. The holographic display showed human vessels in deep space, their hulls bristling with weapons. "Notice the advanced weaponry. Notice the stealth modifications. These are not the primitive ships they claim to possess." Dr. Rodriguez leaned towards Sullivan. "Those aren't our ships," she whispered urgently. "I know," Sullivan replied quietly. Prince Zethkar expanded the display to show detailed technical readouts. "Our experts have analyzed this technology. These weapons could destroy entire worlds. The humans have been secretly developing planet-killer devices while pretending to seek peaceful trade." More images appeared, showing what looked like human soldiers in advanced combat armor, training facilities that seemed far beyond Earth's known capabilities, and weapon factories hidden on remote asteroids. "The evidence is clear," the prince declared. "Humanity joined this summit not to seek membership, but to gather intelligence for their coming war against us all." Chancellor Vortex, the consortium's leader, called for order as worried conversations broke out across the hall. "These are serious accusations. Prince Zethkar, do you have additional proof?" "I do." The prince activated another holographic file. This communication was intercepted from the human delegation just yesterday. A recording began playing. Sullivan's voice, artificially clear through the translation system, seemed to say, "Proceed with final preparations. Once we have their trust, we can strike at the heart of their civilization." Chen's mouth dropped open. "That's not, you never said that." "Of course not," Sullivan murmured. "The humans have been planning genocide," Prince Zethkar continued. Their peaceful farming techniques were actually designed to poison alien food supplies. Their medical research was developing biological weapons specifically targeting non-human species. The accusations continued, each one more damaging than the last. The prince painted a picture of humanity as a species of violent criminals, using deception and false friendship to prepare for galactic conquest. And when confronted with their crimes, what did they do? Prince Zethkar asked. They ran. They refused to face justice because they knew their guilt could not be hidden. Several delegates were now looking at the human section with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. The Caltharian representative, who had seemed interested in human medical research just days earlier, had moved a seat farther away. Chancellor Vortex addressed Sullivan directly. Commander Sullivan, these accusations are extremely serious. How do you respond to Prince Zethkar as evidence? Sullivan stood slowly. The hall fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes focused on his human face. He could feel the weight of his species' future resting on his next words. The evidence speaks for itself, Sullivan said calmly. Shocked murmurs swept through the assembly. Even Chen stared at Sullivan in disbelief. Had he just admitted to everything? However, Sullivan continued, raising his voice slightly. I wonder if the consortium would be interested in seeing the complete evidence, rather than just selected portions. Prince Zethkar's confident expression flickered for just a moment. The consortium has seen all relevant materials, has it? Sullivan asked. He touched the device on his collar, and suddenly the hall's holographic system activated under his control. New images appeared above the assembly. These showed the same human ships from different angles, revealing Velcarian construction details. The timestamp indicated they were taken months before humanity had even applied for consortium membership. These ships, Sullivan said clearly, were built in Velcarian shipyards. Notice the hull plating patterns unique to your empire's construction methods. Notice the energy signatures that match your weapon systems. The prince stepped forward aggressively. Those images are fabricated, are they? Sullivan asked. More recordings began playing real communications between Velcarian military officers, discussing their false flag operation, conversations about creating fake human ships, manufacturing evidence, and timing the frame up to coincide with the diplomatic summit. You see, Sullivan continued, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned assembly. Humans have one interesting trait that many species seem to underestimate. We're very good at listening. The recordings continued. Prince Zethkar's own voice could be heard planning the attack on human colonies, discussing which species would be targeted next, and laughing about how easy it would be to manipulate the consortium into supporting Velcarian expansion. We've been monitoring Velcarian communications since we arrived, Sullivan explained. Every conversation, every military transmission, every secret meeting. When someone challenges you to a fight, sometimes the wisest response is to step back and let them defeat themselves. Prince Zethkar's face had turned a darker shade of purple. You have no right to spy on consortium members. Actually, Chancellor Vortex interrupted. Standard diplomatic protocols allow defensive intelligence gathering. What they've discovered suggests Prince Zethkar, not humanity, poses the real threat. The evidence kept coming. Financial records showing payments to criminal organizations, communications discussing planned attacks on multiple species after humanity was eliminated, military build-up reports that proved the Velcarians had been preparing for conquest long before the summit began. The question, Sullivan said, looking directly at Prince Zethkar, is whether the consortium prefers members who solve problems through violence, or members who prevent wars through patience and intelligence. The prince's confident demeanor had completely collapsed. Around the hall, delegates were studying the evidence with growing anger. The Zephyrian representative stood up and announced that his species would be reviewing all agreements with the Velcarian Empire. This assembly is getting out of hand, Prince Zethkar declared. These accusations against my empire are clearly part of the human deception. But his words carried no weight now. The evidence was too clear, too detailed, too obviously authentic. Sullivan remained standing as chaos erupted around him. Chancellor Vortex was calling for order while security personnel moved toward the Velcarian. Delegation other species were demanding investigations and accountability. Through it all, Sullivan watched Prince Zethkar with the calm patience of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. The trap had been set 2 days ago with a simple, silent walk away from confrontation. Now it had finally closed. The Consortium Assembly Hall had never seen such chaos. Delegates demanded answers while security officers surrounded the Velcarian delegation. Prince Zethkar stood frozen at the podium, his red eyes fixed on Sullivan with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Chancellor Vortex called for order, his eyes blinking rapidly as he processed the flood of evidence still streaming across the holographic displays. Commander Sullivan, these recordings and documents, how long have you been gathering this intelligence? Sullivan stepped forward, his calm presence somehow cutting through the noise. Since before we left Earth, Chancellor. You see, when your species has only been in space for less than a century, you learn to be very careful about who you trust. Dr. Rodriguez and Ambassador Chen exchanged glances. Even they were discovering layers to Sullivan's plan they had never suspected. The Human Intelligence Services began monitoring Velcarian communications 6 months ago, Sullivan continued. Not because we suspected them specifically, but because we monitor everyone who might affect human security. Kim stood up from her seat, activating her own datapad. What the commander means is that we've been running a comprehensive intelligence network since our first contact with galactic civilization. New holographic displays appeared around the hall, showing a complex web of information gathering that stretched across dozens of star systems. The scope was breathtaking. Every human trade mission, every diplomatic contact, every scientific exchange has been gathering data, Kim explained. We've been building the most complete picture of galactic politics and military capabilities that any species has ever assembled. A delegate from the Christek Consortium spoke up, his crystalline voice ringing through the translation system. You mean you've been spying on all of us? We've been learning, Sullivan corrected. When you're the new species in a galaxy full of civilizations that have existed for thousands of years, information becomes your most valuable resource. Prince Zethkar finally found his voice. This proves what I said. Humans are deceptive. Dangerous, actually, interrupted Chancellor Vortex. This proves they're remarkably well prepared. He gestured to the intelligence displays. Most species take decades to develop this kind of operational awareness. Humans achieved it in less than 10 years. Sullivan nodded respectfully to the Chancellor. Our short lifespans have some advantages. We think in terms of immediate action rather than century-long plans. We adapt quickly because we have to. Kim activated another section of their intelligence network. For example, we identified the Velcarian military buildup 3 weeks ago. But instead of responding with military force, Commander Sullivan chose a different approach. Strategic patience, Sullivan said. We realized that Prince Zethkar needed humanity to appear weak and threatening at the same time. Weak enough to justify attack. Threatening enough to convince the Consortium that we were dangerous. The holographic display showed Velcarian communications from weeks before the summit. Military officers discussing how to provoke humans into aggressive responses. Plans for creating false evidence if humans proved too peaceful. They expected us to fight back. Chen said, understanding dawning in her voice. They wanted us to accept the challenge, lose the duel, and then react with anger or threats. Exactly, Sullivan confirmed. Every response they anticipated would have played into their narrative. Fight and lose? Humans are weak. Fight and win through deception? Humans are dangerous. Refuse and make excuses? Humans are cowardly. So, you chose the one response they hadn't planned for, Rodriguez said admiringly. Silence and respect. Sullivan agreed. We gave Prince Zethkar exactly what he asked for, the appearance of human weakness while denying him the propaganda victory he needed. Prince Zethkar stepped forward aggressively. You think you're clever, human, but your games won't save your colonies. My fleets are all ready. Your fleet stopped their advance 2 hours ago. Kim interrupted, consulting her datapad. They Receive new orders to return to Velcarian space immediately. The prince's expression shifted to confusion. That's impossible. I gave no such orders. You didn't, Sullivan said. But the Velcarian High Command did after they received certain information about their prince's unauthorized military operations. A new set of recordings began playing. These were internal Velcarian communications, showing senior military leaders expressing shock and anger at Prince Zethkar's actions. Apparently, the prince had been operating without full approval from his own government. You see, Your Highness, Sullivan continued, while you were focused on your grand plan to destroy humanity, we were also talking to other members of your empire, the ones who value trade and stability over conquest. The recordings revealed that moderate Velcarian leaders had been secretly negotiating with human intelligence officers for weeks. They had been looking for a way to stop the prince's war plans without triggering a civil war within their own empire. The evidence of your conspiracy gave them exactly what they needed. Kim explained, proof that you were acting against Velcarian interests in galactic law. Prince Zethkar's hands clenched into fists. My own people wouldn't dare. Your own people are politicians and traitors. Just like everyone else, Sullivan said. They understand that starting a war with a species under consortium protection would be economically disastrous. Chancellor Vortex was studying the intelligence displays with obvious admiration. Commander Sullivan, the complexity of this operation is remarkable. You've managed to prevent a war, expose a conspiracy, and protect your own species without firing a single shot. That's the human way, Sullivan replied. We prefer to solve problems with intelligence rather than violence. Though we can fight when necessary, we'd rather not. The Caltharian delegate, who had withdrawn his trade proposal days earlier, stood up. Commander, your species' intelligence capabilities, they surpass anything we've seen from civilizations. Twice your age. Our technology helps, Kim admitted. Human quantum communication systems and artificial intelligence networks are more advanced than most species realize. You mean the primitive technology Prince Zethkar mocked? Asked the Zephyrian representative. We let him think it was primitive, Sullivan said with a slight smile. Human diplomatic strategy often involves appearing less capable than we actually are. It makes potential enemies underestimate us while encouraging friends to help us, Doctor. Rodriguez stood up, finally understanding her role in the larger plan. Our medical research, our agricultural techniques, they weren't just trade offerings. They were demonstrations of human problem-solving abilities. Every species in this hall has seen proof that humans can find solutions to problems that have puzzled others for centuries, Sullivan confirmed. We just presented it as simple trade goods rather than advanced science. The implications were staggering. Humanity had entered galactic politics not as weak newcomers begging for acceptance, but as a sophisticated intelligence operation demonstrating capabilities. While gathering information on every potential threat and ally, the question now, Chancellor Vortex said, is what humanity intends to do with all this intelligence and capability. Sullivan looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. The same thing we've always intended, Chancellor. We want to trade, learn, and help solve problems. We just want to do it safely. And if someone threatens that safety, ask the Christec representative. Sullivan's expression remained calm. But something shifted in his eyes, a glimpse of the steel beneath the diplomat's surface. Then they'll discover that humans are very good at making problems disappear quietly, he said. But we much rather make friends than enemies. Prince Zethkar stood alone at the podium. His grand conspiracy collapsed around him. The evidence of his crimes continued streaming across the displays while his own empire's leaders called for his immediate arrest. The trap you set for humanity, Sullivan said to him quietly, was actually a trap for yourself. You just needed someone patient enough to let you walk into it. 3 days later, the consortium assembly hall looked completely different. Where once there had been tension and suspicion, now there was excitement and curiosity. Delegates clustered around the human section, eager to discuss trade agreements, technological exchanges, and security partnerships. Commander Sullivan sat calmly in his chair. reviewing data pads while aliens who had previously ignored humanity now waited patiently for his attention. The transformation was remarkable, but not entirely surprising to those who understood what had really happened. Prince Zethkar was gone. Of course, Velcarian security forces had arrested him within hours of the evidence being revealed. The charges included conspiracy, unauthorized military operations, falsifying intelligence, and attempting to start an interstellar war. His own empire had publicly apologized to the consortium and specifically to humanity. Chancellor Vortex called the assembly to order. We gathered today to vote on humanity's application for consortium membership, as well as several related proposals that have emerged from recent events. Sullivan stood as his name was called. The hall fell quiet, but this time the silence felt respectful rather than hostile. Commander Sullivan, the Chancellor continued. Before we proceed with the vote, the consortium leadership would like to make a formal statement. Ambassador Chen leaned forward in her seat. This wasn't part of the planned procedure. In our 10,000 years of existence, Chancellor Vortex announced, the Galactic Trade Consortium has never witnessed such a masterful demonstration of diplomatic intelligence. Humanity's handling of the Velcarian crisis has redefined our understanding of conflict resolution. Approving sounds echoed through the hall from dozens of different species. Therefore, the Chancellor continued, the consortium leadership unanimously recommends not only accepting humanity's membership application, but offering them a permanent seat on the Security Council. The proposal caused an immediate stir. Security Council seats were reserved for the most powerful and influential species in the galaxy. No new member had ever been offered such a position. Dr. Rodriguez gripped her chair arms. Jake, she whispered, they're offering us one of the most powerful positions in galactic government. More than that, added Kim, checking her data pad for incoming messages. I'm receiving communication requests from 37 different species. They all want to discuss security consulting agreements. The Caltharian delegate stood up. If I may address Commander Sullivan directly. Sullivan nodded respectfully. My species has existed in this galaxy for 6,000 years, the crystalline being said. In all that time, we have never seen a military threat neutralized so completely without a single weapon being fired. How did your people develop such strategic thinking? Sullivan considered the question carefully. We didn't develop it. Exactly. It's more that we had to use it to survive. He gestured to Kim, who activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. Humans evolved in a world with limited resources and many competing groups, Sullivan explained. Those who survived learned to think several steps ahead. We call it planning, but it's really just applied caution. Applied caution that prevented a galactic war, pointed out the Zephyrian representative. Perhaps, Sullivan said modestly, but any species might have done the same thing, given enough information and time to think. The Christek delegate made a sound that translated as amused disagreement. Commander, we've reviewed your intelligence operation. The complexity, the coordination, the timing. Most species would need decades to plan something like this. We had 6 months, Kim said. Exactly our point, the delegate replied. You achieved in months what takes others decades. Your species thinks fast and acts decisively. Chancellor Vortex called for the formal vote on humanity's membership. The result was unanimous approval, followed immediately by another unanimous vote for the Security Council position. As congratulations poured in from round the hall, Sullivan noticed a commotion near the entrance. Velcarian guards were escorting someone inside someone, who requested permission to address the assembly. It was Prince Zethkar. The hall fell silent as the former prince, now wearing simple prison clothing instead of royal robes, walked slowly to the center of the assembly. His escort remained close, but he was clearly not here as a threat. Commander Sullivan, Prince Zethkar said, his voice much quieter than before. I have requested permission to speak with you before my transport to the rehabilitation facilities. Sullivan stood and walked down to meet him. They faced each other. In the center of the hall, surrounded by hundreds of watching delegates. I don't understand. The prince said simply, I had superior military force. I had political support. I had a perfect plan to eliminate your species and expand my empire. How did you defeat me so completely? Sullivan looked at the being who had tried to destroy humanity, and surprisingly, he felt no anger, only something that might have been pity. Your Highness, he said respectfully, you didn't fail because your plan was bad. You failed because you only planned for the responses you expected. What do you mean? You prepared for humans who would fight back aggressively. You prepared for humans who would make excuses or beg for mercy. You even prepared for humans who might try to negotiate. Sullivan paused. But you never prepared for humans who would simply listen. The prince's red eyes showed confusion. Listen, while you were talking, we were learning. While you were planning our destruction, we were understanding your empire's politics. While you were building a trap for us, we were building a better trap for you. Sullivan's voice remained calm and educational, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a student. You see, humans have learned something that many powerful species forget. The strongest response to aggression isn't always counter-aggression. Sometimes it's patience. But you appeared weak, the prince protested. Your own people question your decision. Appearing weak and being weak are different things. Sullivan said, a wise human once said that you should never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. So I didn't interrupt you. Prince Zethkar stared at him for a long moment. You let me destroy myself. I let you make your own choices. Sullivan corrected. You chose to lie, to falsify evidence, to plan genocides. I just made sure everyone could see those choices clearly. The prince nodded slowly, and for the first time since Sullivan had met him, he seemed to understand something important. Your species, he said quietly, you fight wars by not fighting them, when possible. Sullivan agreed. We prefer to solve problems rather than create bigger ones. Prince Zethkar looked around the hall at the delegates who watched their conversation. They'll study what you did here. Your methods will become part of galactic diplomatic training. Good, Sullivan said. Maybe fewer wars will start if more people understand that there are alternatives to violence. The prince extended his hand in the human gesture of respect he had seen Sullivan use days earlier. I underestimated your species completely. I won't make that mistake again. Sullivan shook his hand. I hope you won't need to make any mistakes again. Your Highness. Rehabilitation programs are designed to help people find better ways to solve their problems. As the guards escorted Prince Zethkar away, he called back, Commander. What will you do now that you have power in the galactic government? Sullivan smiled. The same thing we've always planned to do. Help people solve problems. The assembly erupted in applause as the prince departed. Around the hall, delegates were already discussing the new era of galactic diplomacy that humanity would help lead. Ambassador Chen stood beside Sullivan as he returned to the human section. Jake, I have to ask, when you walked away in silence 3 days ago, did you know it would end like this? Sullivan looked at her with the same calm patience he had shown throughout the crisis. Chen, I've learned something important about planning. You can't predict exactly how things will turn out, but if you prepare carefully and think clearly, you can usually find a way to make things work out well. And if they don't work out well, then you adapt and try something else, Sullivan said simply. That's what humans do. Dr. Rodriguez joined them, carrying news of their first official assignment as Security Council members. We've been asked to mediate a border dispute between 3 species. Apparently, everyone wants to see how humans handle interstellar politics. Sullivan nodded, already thinking about the new challenge. Around them, the greatest diplomatic assembly in galactic history continued its work, with humanity now taking its place as a leader among the stars, not through conquest or superior firepower, but through patience, intelligence, and the revolutionary idea that the best way to win a fight is often to avoid having won at all.